Hey y'all, it's Zoe and welcome back to another video on my channel. So today, as you can tell by the title of this video, I am going to be reviewing the movie Joyride, which came out recently. And this is from an adoptee's perspective because there is an adoption storyline in the movie. I'm going to give a disclaimer now. There is a really big spoiler from the movie that's coming up at the very end of this video. The rest of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try my best not to spoil too much about the plot. But if you want to watch this going in just to know what to prepare yourself for as an adoptee, I will be talking about the spoiler and plot twist, so please be warned. Alright, so let's get into this video. Okay, so I'm going to start with some of the more lighter stuff and then get into the more heavier topics. So this is also coming from an Asian Chinese woman perspective as well as an adoptee's perspective. So first of all, there are a few Asian related microaggressions in the movie. It takes place in Seattle, and there is a comment about growing up as the only two Asian girls in town, and you know, like we probably wouldn't even be friends, but we were the only two Asian girls who grew up in town. And if you've seen the trailer, you've seen the scene of the punching on the playground. That is in the show, that scene is in the movie, and they do use that slur in the movie. And then it's like kind of a time jump to when they're in the adult form, which is what they are in for the rest of the movies when they are adults. And the main character, Audrey, she is the one who's adopted. She works at this law firm, and it's a very male-dominated law firm, and they do make a lot of comments about, you know, like, oh, you play good for an associate, but then some people are like, you were gonna say for an Asian or for a woman, and then they're like, no, for an associate because I'm an ally. And it's like little stuff like that. There's this one scene where she gets fired, and see, I told you there's a lot of spoilers. She gets fired, and her boss has to make a comment about how he's still an ally because he fired a white person earlier. And there's comments about having a Mulan themed birthday party, asking her to say something in Chinese. For example, she says that she's learning Chinese on Duolingo, and then her coworkers are like, can you say this and this in Chinese? And then also at the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where she's in school as a young girl, like a 6th grader, and they're doing a family tree assignment. We all love family tree assignments as adoptees, don't we? And some of the other kids in the class make comments about how she's adopted and her parents didn't want her. And one kid even says, I wish I was adopted. I wish my parents would give me up, and just like microaggressions like that. Her close friends who aren't adopted and did grow up with Asian parents, they sometimes make comments about how she's whitewashed. Her friends make comments about, you know, like the things that she likes and the music she listens to are very white. Like she tends to list off things that are typically liked by white people as opposed to Chinese people. When they get to China, there is a lot of culture shock that Audrey experiences. For example, when they're in the airport, she talks about, oh, I've never been around so many Asian people. I blend right in. And one of the characters can also like tell what kind of Asian everyone is. So there's a part in the airport where she's like, oh, that's a Taiwanese person, that's a Shanghai Chinese person, these are Korean people. So it's kind of just like categorizing different types of East Asians. There was also a lot of culture shock when she went to a club in terms of the language barrier, the customs, things like that. One thing that was kind of weird is that the fake actors, so one of the characters is like an actress, and the other people who are playing like the other actors in the like show they're filming in the movie, they all speak perfect English, which if you were in China and you were watching this like a film, like someone filming a movie or a show, and they weren't filming, most likely they would be speaking Chinese when they're not on set. And it's also very Americanized Chinese. Every time they talk, every time she's like meeting a business type of person, it's very like Americanized Chinese in the accent. So they did not try to find anyone who could actually speak like Chinese with a good accent. And also the character who was filming that like Chinese show did not really match the aesthetics of a typical Chinese drama. If you watch Chinese drama, specifically more historical Chinese dramas like Word of Honor, the actors and actresses have a typical aesthetic, which is usually like very pale skin, very skinny, things like that. And the character who was playing this historical drama actress did not match that aesthetic either. And there's also some parts where people say like, oh, she's a typical American, you know, like how can you know yourself if you don't know where you come from, because she doesn't know anything about her background. So it's just like little comments like that. And then there is some parts where they're commenting about how tan she is. There's one part where there's like a little boy driving them and someone says, how old is the driver? And then another person says 12, counting the Chinese way, so 11. That's not really like a microaggression. I just thought it was something like a cultural related aspect of how like the age system is different. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the race and culture related aspects. So now I'm going to get into the adoption stuff. So for starters, I thought the adoption stuff was very inaccurate. So just your warning, it's not a very accurate representation of what adoption is like. So in the trailer you see her looking at a photo of her birth mother. That is not very common in Chinese adoptions to have a picture of your birth mom, because most people in China don't really want to admit that they gave up a child for adoption. So when I first saw that photo, I was kind of a little skeptical. I was like, that's not a very accurate representation of what Chinese adoption is like. And then when they get to China, one of her friends says that her birth mother agreed to be able to be contacted at the time of adoption. This is also not very typical. A lot of times people don't even know who their birth parents are. It's very, very hard to find your birth parents in China. A lot of times they don't want to be contacted. And there is a part where Audrey talks about like, I'm not Chinese, I'm not American. So definitely that kind of in-betweenness that a lot of adoptees feel. And then when they get to the orphanage, on the back of that photo, the lady working there kind of like remembers her almost, and it's like, oh yeah, I've kept records of like everyone that's gone through here, which is also not very common for them to like have. At least I don't think it's very common for them to like have those records just like easily, readily available for anyone to come find. And then this is where the plot twist and spoiler happens. So if you don't want to hear it, you can skip this entire part of the video, and I'll put a timestamp in the description box where you can skip to get to the ending. But she finds out that she is not Chinese and she is Korean, and that was like the biggest plot twist I have ever heard. But the orphanage lady talks about how she looks Korean, how her birth mother's name is Korean. Audrey just like drowns in this spiral of shock where she's like, I've grown up Chinese, I learned Chinese, done all this other stuff to be Chinese. The actress herself is Korean American, the actress who plays Audrey. So I mean, in that sense, I guess it's good that like she found out she was Korean, because then a Korean person was playing a Korean character. But yeah, so that was like the really big plot twist. So she ends up actually going to South Korea to her adoption agency to see what information she can find now that she knows that she is Korean. And she finds the record. She goes to like the orphanage, they give her the record, and she finds out that her mother passed away. So she goes to visit her gravesite, and then at the gravesite she meets her mother's husband. The husband is not her biological dad, it's just her husband, and he ends up telling this story of how she was born, and it turns out that her birth mother's parents did not approve of the pregnancy and sent her to China to have the baby, and then she was sent back to South Korea. This also does not seem extremely accurate to me. What I do know about Korean adoption that I've read about and learned about has nothing to do with women being sent to another country to give birth. A lot of what I've heard about Korean adoption is stuff about how Holt International came to be, how a lot of Korean adoption started after the Korean War, when there were a lot of orphan children and there were a lot of mixed race babies. If mixed race children were born into a homogenous society, they would be outcast, so a lot of women gave their children up for adoption. But I have not heard about Korean women going to China to give up their babies. So that was a little weird for me to hear. And I'm not going to tell you the entire story of her birth mom. I guess you can watch that part for yourself. But it was just really interesting to me, and I definitely want to read up more on it and figure out if that's really true. But that was the biggest plot twist, and it's definitely not very accurate of adoption representation. I think that the emotions that Audrey goes through in terms of not feeling like she belongs, feeling like she has to learn Chinese, a lot of the microaggressions that she received growing up, those are all real. Those are all valid experiences, and I think the writers did a really good job at telling that side of the adoption story. But in terms of all of the more legal, paperwork related stuff, I don't think it was very accurate at all. Finally, at the very end of the movie, there's a lot of apologies that happen, but there is really not many apologies related to all of the adoption and culture related microaggressions. So it's the very classic 4 best friends get into a fight, and that's the climax of the movie, and then they apologize and make up for it at the end of the movie, but there's no apology for comments about whitewashing and all these other comments. So that's just something I thought was interesting. So yeah, that was my review of the movie. Overall, it's a very funny movie. I laughed a lot. It is very raunchy, so viewer discretion advised. I think it has the emotional part of an adoptee's experience, feeling like you need to prove yourself, feeling like you're stuck in between 2 identities, receiving microaggressions of people, saying, oh, I wish I was adopted, and also people saying, oh, you're good for an Asian, or you're good for a woman. Like, all of that emotional stuff was there. And there's also a part where you kind of hear from the side of the birth mother as well, like her birth mother, and I think those feelings are also very valid. Like, if I were to imagine myself in that situation, that would be the kind of stuff that I was saying to my child that I gave up for adoption. But other than that, I think like it's not a very accurate representation of what adoption from China is like. Nope, I don't know anyone who has a photo with their birth mom. It's not that easy to get access to your records, and I don't know any Chinese adoptee who has found out that they're not actually Chinese and that they're Korean. So I guess, you win some, you lose some, but I do think it's a good movie. I think it's funny. I think adoptees would enjoy some of it. Just, you have been warned, you have been advised. These are just my thoughts as a Chinese adoptee. Yeah, so that was my review. I know it was a little long, but I hope all the adoptees out there who are listening and watching appreciate this little heads up and trigger preparation. If you've seen the movie, please comment your thoughts down below because I am really curious to know what you think about it. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Let me know if you want me to do any other kind of film or TV show or even book reviews about adoption from adoptees' perspective. But yeah, that's really all I have for you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!